Jefferson wrote that letter was not because we could believe that religion will influence us. I mean, of course, we've come a long way since the time of Jefferson and the Founding Fathers. Now we have many different faiths represented, and I think back then the Founding Fathers could not have even begun to predict the amount of faiths and the level of diversity we have here in the United States. And I think that if they had seen that, they would have been very proud. But I think they also would have noticed that the reason that they had put in the Establishment Clause within the United States Constitution is to protect those diverse faiths and to protect people's ability. So when he was talking about this wall, he was talking about making sure that no one faith could go and influence and control people and say, no, you have to do this. Because of course, a lot of these individuals who came to the and came to the area to colonize and became what was now known as the United States, they came away from religious persecution in the Church of England, the Anglican Church. You know, they weren't being able to exercise their own freedom of religion. That's why they came, and so that's where he was basing it. He said he didn't want that to happen again, and so I think that that's really kind of the crux of what was being discussed, and it was kind of being twisted around in that. But my idea is also upon that theory is the idea we don't want to necessarily focus on one religion, this wall we're discussing, and that brings me to a concern of they're discussing creationism and intelligent design being discussed in public schools. What version of creationism or intelligent design are we going to talk about as a theory? I mean, are we talking about young Earth? Are we talking about evolutionary creationism? Are we talking about literalists? Because either way, one of them is going to get forgotten, and then they're going to be able to cry wolf and say, whoa, wait a second, or not cry wolf, but they're going to be able to say, wait, I'm not being represented here. My constitutional rights are being violated because that's young Earth, and I'm old Earth creationism, and I'm not being represented. So
is
that
there
was
a
a
response
concern.
to that from the proposition side?
Well, I think we agree. I thought those were all excellent points, and certainly you know your history, and I think that completely resonates with what I said in my opening, which was we are not advocating the teaching of one particular creation story. We're not going to ask students to open their Bibles to the book of Genesis, for example, or one of the mystery religions of the ancient world, because as you point out, we do live in a pluralistic society. So on that point, we would say, yep, we agree. So our case has been somewhat different. Our case has been that if you shield students from the elephant in the room, the obvious one, namely that many scientists, PhD having guys and gals, through a faithful examination of some of just a few of the scientific features of our world that Mark has laid out, that they have concluded that the evidence points beyond the mere material world, and we've contended that to blinker the science classroom with a strict naturalistic approach is to actually be biased too much against religion. And we do agree that students should have the freedom to ignore religion if they like. They can certainly ignore the teaching of religion in their social studies classes when it's presented as part of the state-mandated curriculum standards. That's already done. So I don't know what to do with the case law other than say I think it's misguided. And so all we're proposing here is that the theory of intelligent design be given its due. And by that same token, it would be open to scientific criticism, and we would welcome that.
Thank you. We have time for one more response, and then we'll move to the audience questions and answers. So if you would like to start thinking of questions that you'd like to ask the debaters, is there anybody on the opposition side that wants to take up that response?
I can pass this down to you guys if you had anything, because I don't want to hog the mic, but I was just going to ask one little tiny question. How can students ignore the faith if they want to, if they're being graded on, that faith? Like, oh, you got an F because you ignored the fact that we taught creationism. Well, I'm sorry, I'm atheist. Well, I'm sorry, you still get an F. That's kind of a tricky line to walk, so.
And to sort of piggyback on that, I don't think that I respect you guys very much in your explanation of intelligent design. I've learned something tonight for sure. But I don't think that your explanation of intelligent design is the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room, I mean, the phrase you guys saw plastered on the flyers that brought you here was, does God belong in the classroom? Should creationism be taught? And I'm not trying to say that we should steer this debate just in that direction, but what I am trying to say is I don't think that it's quite the elephant in the room and that people are clamoring for that particular explanation as much.
Okay, thank you. Now we'd like to come to the audience question and answer part of the debate. One of our debate theater founders, George here, has positioned himself among you with a microphone. Just as a general request, could we ensure that the questions are genuine as opposed to an attempt to get in your own personal opinion on the matter? We'd invite you guys all after the debate, after the official debate, to have your own personal debates outside. But for right now, so we can cover as much relevant material as possible, if we could have genuine questions, or I'll yell at you.
You just name and question, and I'll introduce this one since I know him. This is Steve Henderson. Are you a board member of the NAACP? Are you a board member of the NAACP? The communications director for the NAACP, and he also will be an integral part of our debate about politics and minorities. So, Steve, your question?
First of all, I think it's unconstitutional that I had to endure geometry in high school, and now those nasty word problems are being reincarnated in my grandson to torment me once again. My question to you guys is, how come just the discussion of the possibility of a creator now becomes something that's forced on us when a school is an area where we discuss ideas, both pro and con?
Given the amount of things that teachers are required to cover in such a short period of time, they have what you call the state standards and the essential standards, the ones you must hit. And while school is a place to question things, in terms of a science class, it's not a place for abstract what-ifs that don't really have much concrete scientific basis, and especially when there are so many that do have this sort of evidence-based background, so much so that they're considered laws, not theories, not hypotheses, but laws. There's so much of those to be covered in the science classes that do affect, state testing and so forth, and the prerequisites for college and degree advancement, which is the purpose of the science class, to allow them to advance further in science, even into college and graduate programs, that there just really isn't the time for that. And it doesn't really seem like the place. It's more the place to lay a basis for a scientific knowledge that will be carried on to the next levels.
If I could piggyback off that for,
Go ahead, Adam. And then we'll move to Mark.
One of the things when we're talking about evolution, and one of the things that I brought up is evolution itself tries to explain what we know about the world based on the evidence that's presented to us. So when we see fossil evidence of dinosaurs, and that's not necessarily explained through faith or through Genesis as an explanation, doesn't discredit the fact that dinosaurs existed or the fact that dinosaurs can be part of that discussion. But in science, in the teaching of evolution, at the very basis of it is just, this is what we know about the world. And those scientists continue to question what it is about the world. And the proposition also brought up that eventually some people come to terms with faith for those things that they can't explain, the why. For the most part, scientists can't explain the why, but they can tell you the what and the how based on this evidence. But the why is an individual exploration that we all take in different paths. People take that same exploration within their own faith to find out where their heart lies, where their belief structure lies, and it might not necessarily be based on evidence, but just pure faith in what they know. But I don't think God needs to necessarily be out of the discussion, but it can't be one particular viewpoint imposed on a group of people. So in one instance, this is what we know about the world and this is what we can prove. And in the other, which is a larger realm of discussion, which we're having here, and it's been a discussion that has gone on for centuries, it'll continue to evolve.
Mark Bakai.
Both Derek and Adam, I think, had some good points there. I like what they said, that in a science class we should be paying attention to evidence as well, and that we also note that science has limits. It can tell us how something happened, perhaps, or what. Sometimes it's only what happens. It can barely tell us what happens, let alone how something happens. But why something happens, ultimate causes and things like that, they're usually removed from the purview of experimental science, in any case. This is exactly my point, that we already have a worldview that is expressed in our science classrooms called naturalism, that the whole universe is made of matter and energy. There's nothing supernatural about it. It's matter and energy existing in space and time, and that's it. Nothing else without any remainder. And so this particular view, I submit to you, is quasi-religious because we don't prove that by evidence or by scientific experimentation. It is actually something that is already in our classrooms that we are allowed to discuss, naturalism, but the opposing viewpoint that there is purpose and meaning to the world, there is something beyond that we're not allowed to discuss. So I feel that that's unfair. And the other thing I would say is that if we're talking about evidence, this is something the intelligent design movement, if you've read any of their papers, design is detectable. We look at detectable in this way. I'll just say this quickly and then I'll put the mic down. You can have, when you look at a natural occurrence, some kind of natural phenomenon, it can be random, everything arranged randomly. It can be arranged in a law-like fashion, like in a crystal, or it can be arranged in an irreducible complexity of information, something that's there that actually, you can see the odds of this happening just by random chance are enormous. So while on the one hand, I think one of the reasons why if we're going to exclude intelligent design from the classroom, we should exclude naturalism as well, to be fair. That would fit with the evidence-based sort of way of teaching science. But in addition to that, design can be detectable, and so we can include it as well in an evidence-based science classroom.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience?
Well, I know you guys are talking a lot about evolution and yada, 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 and I'm only in 9th grade, so a lot of this may be over my head. But one simple thing that I haven't really heard touched upon is, well, if these individuals, these young children are going to school and learning, if they were to learn about these things and they go home and tell their parents, well, what are the parents going to think of these things? What are those parents' opinions? And what do you think is going to happen with if the parents are against what these children are learning in schools?
If the opposition side would like to take that question.
I agree with you. And going back to one of the points I made about something that I forgot. No. About the idea that the government shouldn't intervene in sort of the blank state that a kid starts from in developing their religious views and other world views, that the government shouldn't meddle with that. And when we start doing it even a little bit, we run the risk of not only predisposing the young person to a certain worldview, but also alienating the parents, causing a lack of faith in the educational system, and we don't really have a shortage of that already. So I think we do put ourselves further down a dangerous path of creating less faith in the educational system and more doubts on the parts of parents as well. So that's a good point.
The scenario in which you're describing is actually what we call in the debate world as non-unique. Let me explain what that means. We already, in public schools, teach things that parents disagree with. Some parents disagree with sex education. Some parents disagree with how government is taught in the classroom. Some parents disagree with evolution itself. So there's already that in existence. So because it exists, it means that the problem that you bring up is actually nothing that we're unfamiliar with. And in fact, just as I, in any public school, would have to understand and know Marxism, though I'm completely against it, and required to be able to tell the tenets of Marxism, so could someone understand a theory and not agree with it at all, but just be able to understand the arguments and evidence behind the theory. That is what we want to happen within the classroom, to allow that clash to take place between an all-naturalistic universe and a universe that actually had some design to it.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience?
My question is, we're discussing God, and it seems as though we're primarily discussing whatever that being might be, force, etc., in a science classroom. But nothing ever stays in one classroom. I mean, these things end up in the English classroom, and they end up in the history classroom, and they end up in every other classroom, every other subject that the students take, it gets brought up again. And I know this because I'm an English teacher, and they'll bring up things that they learned in science. So maybe it's more of an observation. I'm just wondering, what's the idea that it's going to stay in the science classroom seems a little bit absurd to me. It's going to spill over into the other, areas, and what is that going to look like, and how are teachers going to have to address those things, and in the areas that maybe we didn't intend for it to fall into?
Well, I'll respond because she's one of my beloved colleagues. So thanks for coming. I think that's a great question, and some really good questions here, because it does hit the heart of the matter, which is these are real schools, real people, real families, real teachers. As abstract as we can get with it, these have practical consequences. So, yeah, and I would say the solution to that is not a sort of, to borrow Mark's analogy, to not blinker ourselves with dogma, to allow students to pursue answers where they can find them. The solution to, wow, all these ideas are kind of running around like puppy dogs. Yeah, so let's name them, okay? And let's pinpoint them and say, well, yeah, this kid is saying that this teacher is saying this. Well, okay, fine. Let's debate it. That's why I love this, what we're doing right now. I love the idea of free dialogue. Isn't that what public education should be about? A liberal society should be about the free exchange of intellectually respectable ideas. And you can't do that if you are going to exclude a respectable intellectual idea from the playing field before they even show up, and then call the game.
A response from opposition?
I think that, we would be, and the same side of that coin, we agree with the idea of having an open dialogue and, of course, having debate. I mean, that's why we're here, too, and, we enjoy it. But I do think that there's a fundamental problem with saying, like, oh, we're going to integrate creationism or intelligent design or whatever, and we're going to put it specifically in a classroom, and we haven't been able to prove that this is a provable theory. This is based on a faith-based book, and that's, I think, the inherent problem. But there's plenty of room for, the idea of if, you wanted to ever discuss, like, say, okay, well, we're going to have a Bible study course, or we're going to have a world faiths course. And there are plenty of classes like that. And I just, I think that's another issue is, like, there's science and there's faith. Why can't you have the Bible study class or the Bible study story in the myth or creationist class? It doesn't have to go with the science one. So while we agree that you shouldn't be able to put down open debate, and we don't think that we are on this side, because we do encourage debate. And of course, we encourage people to follow whatever faiths they want. You can go to any Sunday school you want and listen to the creationist myth, the creationist theories and stories happening there. But when you go to public school, you don't have to, be told about intelligent design, because ultimately, a lot of times when the Supreme Court cases have come down, they've said that it directly infringes on those students' rights, because a lot of students didn't believe in the creationist myth in the first place. So.
Good, thank you. Is there another question from the audience?
My name's Elaine Spear, and in the Constitution of the United States, there is no such thing as separation of church and state. The Founding Fathers never intended to take God out of school, ever. Our document was based on the Bible. Every university was a seminar for study of religious training. All of these things, schools today, they have a revisionist. They take everything out that has anything to do about Christianity. There's many faiths in this country, but this nation, its fabric is Christian. Others are welcome, but you don't erase Christianity just because they're here. Though, and in the schools, I know that there's many things that are taken out. They don't study the Reformation because that's, biblical, it has to do with that. But I would challenge you on that. Find it in the Constitution. There is no such thing. Thomas Jefferson wasn't even in the country when the Declaration of Independence was drawn up and all, so he can't very much say that he put that in there because it's not there.
This seems to bring us back to the question of the two-way wall that we discussed earlier, if the opposition would like to quickly respond to that.
I think one of the most important parts of the Constitution is that they built it so that it would be bigger than any one person or any one group or ideological group, including the Founding Fathers. most of our case is, in terms of the evidence, is built upon Supreme Court decisions, which are clearly stipulated in the Constitution for the role of the Supreme Court to deal with legal issues like this and determine their validity. So our trust is placed more in the system that the Founding Fathers created versus in the individual opinions of the Founding Fathers themselves. So I think that it's very important that we adhere to the way the Constitution operates on its own, and in so doing, we require society to be bigger than the people that are in it.
Hi, my name is Andrew. When I learned about evolution in public schools, I learned from it from a textbook that had over 100 years of experiments that were set out to prove or disprove evolution as a theory and found it to be true. Creationism seems like a relatively young theory in comparison to that. And I was just wondering what the threshold for teaching things in science alongside evolution would be.
Yeah, I like the idea of what you said regarding a threshold, and I think that's a very, very important concept to have. What is the threshold of the theory that is to be taught? Let me just explain that the threshold that often scientists give in order to say that we cannot teach creationism, they actually don't meet their own threshold when it comes to evolution. Let me tell you what I mean by that. In order for evolution to be true, 4 propositions regarding evolution must be proven to be true in order for it to be a viable, acceptable theory. But evolution cannot prove these 4 propositions. Let me show you what I mean.